Hello everybody, it's Lumi and Finistra, and today we're going to talk about the blame game. If you've been reading up on the news, on the internet, and everything else going on in the world today, we human beings love to do this, even when it's not justified. I'm talking about poking fingers at another and saying it's your fault. In this case, we have examples of this blame game from everything from Ebola to ISIS to, yes, even the environment, weather concerns. I'm not going to worry about so much about Ebola or ISIS. That's something Michele does, and I'm going to leave that one off the table. But what I am going to talk to you today about is weather. We human beings have been very fortunate. We have survived the last ice age. And potentially almost just about totally made everybody extinct. We tend to forget that. Of course, 75,000 years ago, we human beings did not have the modern technology that we have today. And we were hunter-gatherers intended to be in small groups. Today, we have all this modern technology from mass transit to pipelines carrying fuel, power grids carrying electricity, telecommunications networks, satellites in space. But there's one thing that is constantly, always a sad reality. If the environment that we live in decides to take a pear shape and totally knock us flat on our backsides, there's nothing you can do about it. 75,000 years ago, a supervolcano in Tambora off of Sumatra belched out a few nasty surprises. It started a volcanic winter. And the question is was that what started the Ice Age 75,000 years ago, or was that just kind of coincidental? Well, what is not coincidental is the fact is that we human beings at that time were ill-prepared to deal with any kind of event like this. And a good portion of the population of known population of human beings of about 1 million people was reduced to a breeding population of 30,000 people in a period of a couple of years. We live in a day and age when even the International Panel on Climate Change, that for a long time was telling us that we have to lower our carbon footprint, and we have to change the way we live, and we have to be willing to accept that the world is going to get warmer. Only now have they begun to backpedal and realize, I think we got it wrong. But we don't want to go ahead and make it officially public that we got it wrong, because that means that we will be stuck having to admit that we made mistakes. And the International Panel on Climate Change, IPCC, doesn't want to do that. Okay? So even to this day, they're still trying to tell us that climate change is still happening, global warming is still happening, maybe there's a break in it, blah, 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 blah. However, me and Michele and others who are more familiar with the reality are not falling for that attitude. I wanted to tell you something about what we see what's kind of happening in the next few years. And I'm only talking about in the next few years. We've already seen the beginnings of this. parts of the United States are not getting warmer. They're getting colder. We know that our sun is beginning the process of settling down. It's still unstable, but it's not as bad as it could be. We know that volcanism, that is, volcanoes, are indeed very active. Seismic activities are up. But the most important thing is that we, the people of the earth, have got to stop saying to each other, Rusty, come on over here. Come here and enjoy the artificial sun. Yeah, by the way, this cat is also aware of what's going on, because if you can see, he's bulking up. Like me and Michele are. He's bulking up because he's preparing for that long winter. And he knows the reality. He also knows that it's going to be harder for him to find a mate to breed and have kittens with, but he knows that. But he also, like human beings, is enjoying the benefits of modern age. We happen to be very lucky. We have central heating, we have electric lighting, we have computers, we have internet, we have all this stuff, but yet, if the Earth really does decide that global warming is definitely not going to happen, and global cooling will continue to develop into a much longer trend, I don't think it matters how many internet connections you got, or how big your railroad is, or how fancy and sophisticated your infrastructure is for your trucks to get your food to the stores. The sad truth is that you will find that you will be ill-prepared to deal with the reality around you. We happen to be living in a time when all of this so-called modern technology is here. But the truth is, if anything can go wrong, it will. It's all basically not holding together as well as it could. Part of the reason is lack of maintenance. Part of the reason is it was ad hoc from the beginning, and, well, it's not going to take much. Say, for example, a geomagnetic storm could seriously destroy a good portion of the power grid. A major supervolcano eruption, such as Yellowstone National Park, is certainly going to cause our food crops to be seriously devastated on the United States Midwest, and that alone is going to affect the East Coast. Even if the ash does not have an immediate impact, the inability to get food from the heartland of the United States to the into the inner cities is going to be a problem. Now, how does this have to do with being a snow queen? Human beings love to poke fingers at somebody else. They love to say, it's your fault. It's your fault that you have basically put the IPCC models on their head. It's your fault that we're freezing to death. It's your fault that we're going hungry. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to tell you something right now. Michele and I have worked on the models trying to warn you from the beginning that these days are coming, that you will need to plan. Michele, exactly how are you planning on coming up with a rebuttal to Tom Lupshu's needs to stock up? I don't know, because the first thing is that so many people on fixed incomes don't have the extra money, even to prepare for 90 days. To prepare for years, I can't do it. Nobody can. I don't think the average person has the ability to plan for years. And yet, what would be the best solution for people in the low income category. I don't know, because some would say go back with your families and hunker down with them. Establish a small collective group of people who have skills to help you weather a storm. That's always a good idea, but I don't know if that's going to work in a long-term trend such as possibly 10 years of volcanic winter, or of course the significant deteriorating conditions of an ice age. And I think that we're going to be seeing that people are not going to be looking forward to the reality is that they may not be able to prepare for the situation at hand. It's just too big. Look at what damage Hurricane Sandy did to Long Island and coastal New Jersey. I mean, that was a super hurricane, and that did a number of damage to the East Coast, and parts of the East Coast are still stinging from the amount of damage that was done because of Hurricane Sandy. Yeah, and people are still feeling the after effects of trying to rebuild their lives. Yes. And that is just an example of the kind of damage that even pushed FEMA beyond here on the East Coast, beyond anything even Katrina in Louisiana did. In New Orleans, it took many years for people in Katrina devastated parishes to rebuild. And this is still occurring. The rebuilding is still going on in Katrina, Louisiana. I think so, yeah. And there's still a lot of rebuilding in Long Island and in parts of the East Coast where Sandy devastated the infrastructure. People who were living in the cities, for example, were depending on their natural gas working, which was. But their electricity was not working. Right. And those people were finding out that even though they had gas, they had no way to run the central heating system because the electricity that was needed to power the central heating system just wasn't working. That was a problem. That was a big problem for a good portion of the people in New York City. People that were trying to get gasoline for the generators at the time could not get them because there was no gas stations working to pump gas from the underground storage tanks for them. Well, in the case of this type of environment, such as a supervolcano, which could potentially devastate a good portion of the North American continent, I mean, there's a good portion of the United States that will have no electricity because the weight of the fucking gas could seriously damage power lines, long distance transmission lines, communications lines, plumbing, such as gas and water might still be running, but by the time you get those materials to the person with no way, for example, to run the electricity, they can't get the furnace to work, and so the people would freeze. And that's exactly where the problem is. This is one of the reasons why you and I mean, back when you were the Snow Queen, back from 1870 to 1910, there was already in existence was backup systems. People had wood stoves. Yes. People had a supply of wood or coal on hand. Yes, for a couple of days anyway. They didn't have infinite amounts of fuel. No, but they had fuel. And electricity was in its infancy. Yes, okay. So, the sad truth is, Loom, is we here in the 21st century have painted ourselves into a corner because everything is so interconnected on everything else that you can't say to one person, well, okay, you don't have a heat, well, go ahead, start a fire in the stove. You can't. There's no stove to start a fire in. Exactly correct. Or you might say, okay, well, why don't you go ahead and turn your thermostat up? I want to find out that you can't because there's no electricity to run the electrics to run the furnace. The only thing good about this would be is the fact is that once we were at the full swing, is don't have to worry about refrigeration as much. That's true, but still, the inability to make sure that we have the needs for sanitation. Oh, let's not forget this. In many cities, and Winston is certainly not immune, they depend on what they call lift pumps. We lost power after Winter Storm Alfred. And yeah, we did lose power also after Winter Storm or Hurricane Sandy. But the worst of it was after, actually I keep calling it Winter Storm Alfred. I really shouldn't, because it's not winter. It wasn't winter. Alfred was a major snowstorm. It happened right before Halloween. And the damage of knocking down all those trees, many of them which still had their autumn leaves on them, into the power lines that fell collapsed because of the weight of the snow, resulted in cities like Winston losing electricity that runs things such as the sewage lift pumps. Now, I don't know if you know anything about the way modern sewage systems work in cities today, but they all depend, especially in the low-lying areas, what they call lift pumps. Lift pumps act as a kind of like a sump pump. A sump pump you might be familiar with from your basement. There is a small reservoir that fills up with rainwater, obviously, as your basement starts flooding, right? And then the pump is supposed to pump that water out of the building and into a drainage area outside of the house. Well, in this case, what it does is it takes all the sewage from the low-lying toilets and sinks and bathtubs and washing machines and what have you, and pumps it up to a higher area. Maybe, for example, the sewage treatment plant may be at a higher altitude or higher latitude because of reasons that the way the city may have been built. Without, depending on how big the city is, depending on how much waste is collecting in the lift pump, there may be enough reserve capacity to hold a couple of days of waste. If the sewage treatment plant can't get the lift pump running, it's going to back up. It's going to overflow. And when it overflows, the risk of contagion and contamination of people's homes and drinking water supplies increases. So we were fortunate that in the case of Winston, that either A, they had a diesel generator running to keep the lift pump area clear, or it was large enough capacity that they were able to keep hold the waste until the electricity returned to get it to the sewage treatment plant. But if you lose power for days or weeks, like what happened in after Hurricane Sandy in Long Island and in New Jersey and parts of New York City, that could be all it takes to make a bad situation much, much worse, because the needs of removing waste from the environment will not happen. Now, obviously, we have Winston is built in the hills, foothills of here, Connecticut, and one of the problems is is you got houses on the hills.
Yeah.
Okay? And they flush the toilet. Let's say the lift pump does fail to get emptied. All of a sudden, downtown Main Street is swimming in poo. From the houses, say, on Central Avenue to the Regional 7 High School to the other, houses out of town that are in the hills that depend on our system. That could have been a real fiasco. Fortunately enough, we were lucky. But I'm sure that the managers in town were aware of the concerns and probably said to themselves, we need to make sure we can keep this situation from becoming worse than it is. And I can tell you that the fire marshals were also concerned, rightfully, about fire. With all the people that were running generators. And unfortunately, the tens of people that were trying to run generators in sometimes without proper safety precautions, people were succumbing to the fumes in the past, and they wanted to make sure that that did not happen here. And so they did. So we worked on protecting the American people in Winsted from those contaminants. By the way, speaking of other issues, what about the cats? If we lose power for days, how would they affect them? Well, they depend on food just like everybody else does. If we can't get to the store to buy them cat food, and we don't have any food to eat for ourselves, and they can't forage and find food for themselves, they're gonna succumb just like we would. I mean, that's a serious issue. And so therefore what Tom Lupshu is talking about is just sadly enough, it's just reminding us that we human beings are unfortunately have no perfect plan to protect ourselves from the sad reality that we will unfortunately be at the mercy of the elements. So if obviously Yellowstone volcano blows its top, there will be a very much likely a shortage of food because it's in the middle of the country. And when it gets off in the middle of the country, what's going to happen is it's going to bisect the country in half. All the food from the East Coast is not going to get to the West Coast, which isn't that much. All the food from the West Coast, such as California, is not going to get to the East Coast, which is much more of a problem because the cities in the East Coast are going to be rightfully very hungry. No food is more than likely will still be available from the Midwest because either A, the transportation structures are kaput, which is certainly a really serious issue, or even possibly the food warehouses are so inundated and buried by ash that and the lack of working transit is going to result in no food going to East or West Coast. So California, for example, providing they have adequate drinking water, but that got to be affected too because their drinking water comes from the middle of the country in the Colorado area. And through the aqueducts. Right. So clearly that means that we need to have a regional system of food distribution. Now, do you have any idea what would be the best arrangement? No, not really. Because of the mass transit and says something called just in time and other things. I don't think we really have much of a system in place at this point that can provide the food and needs for millions of people here in the East Coast. And I know the same is true with the West Coast. Because the United States won't be so united anymore. They'll be split and bisected by this major no man's land of the Midwest, where nothing is going to be able to get through. And either the railroad tracks will be so buried under volcanic ash that if they could even get the trains to run, to the infrastructure will also be too damaged to do anything. So I really wish I could come up with an answer. I agree. So I guess the only thing we can do is just tell people is, you've been warned. Yeah, you've been warned. I've been warning you. Let me warn you this time. And by the way, right now it's very cold outside. It's windy out there too, and it's got a little bit of a wind chill to it. Yes, it does. Okay, so, but for right now, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to let you go. And we want you to know that we really appreciate you taking the time to watch these videos, both of us. And as much as I really wish I could give you some, absolute good news, I can't. And I'm not going to lie to you. Like me and Lumi have said, there's just too much things going on in the world right now. There's just too many unknown variables. Is there anything we can say for the next 3 months? Otherwise, yeah. Hunker down. Try to get some food on hand. Make sure you have fuel for your home. Make sure you have fuel for your generator if you need one. If you have any kind of alternative heating that doesn't depend on electrical power to run, that would be great. As far as refrigeration goes, it's winter. I don't think for most people refrigeration is going to be a major issue at this point. So just focus on keeping you and your family warm. That's what I would say. Okay? If you want to go further than that, that's fine. You could just do that too. But just make sure to play it safe, and that's all we can do. And please, you want to say it together? Don't blame us for your problems. We warned you. Good night, everybody. Good night, everybody.